All right, welcome. Thanks very much for coming in. Today I'm going to introduce you to Trek Metals Limited. Trek's a small Australian-based ASX-listed explorer with projects in Gabon in West Africa and also in Australia. Our flagship Crescent Zinc lead project in Gabon will be the focus of this talk today, but I will introduce our Australian projects along the way. Enjoy that. Just a quick mention about our board. I won't bore you with too many details. Other than to say our chairman, Greg Bittar, is an investment banker from Australia. Myself, I'm an exploration geologist, about 20 years experience. We have a highly credentialed commercial lawyer, Michael Bowen, based in Perth, and Sonia Neem runs a small geological consultancy, also based in Perth. We have a relatively tight capital structure, a market cap of around $10 million, and approximately $2.5 million US in the bank, and no debts. Trek, in its former life as Zambezi Resources Limited, some of you may know, has a long history in Africa, and we aim to continue that with a presence here long term. So the Crescent Zinc lead project in Gabon. Gabon's a small country, if you're not familiar with it, south of Cameroon, west of the DRC in West Africa. It's a very stable and relatively wealthy country with a mature oil industry. A solid infrastructure base and a strong French influence, and the food is consequently inside Libreville in the capital is actually fantastic. The Crescent lead zinc project is accessed via a bitumen road, a dual lane highway, which is as good as any road anywhere in the world, out of Libreville, onto all-weather unsealed roads that are used by the logging industry. There's an extensive logging industry down in this region. The Yano port here, calling it a port is a little bit of a stretch, but it is a river siding that's used by the logging industry as an export facility, running dumb barges up the river to the major export hub at Port Gentil. Onshore oil field here at Rabi also uses that infrastructure, that barge route up the river to bring in infrastructure requirements for the oil fields. There are about 3 oil pumping facilities in the area, so getting in and around and having that infrastructure there is a solid bonus for the project. We even get mobile phone coverage in some areas inside the project. So even though it is remote, it's actually not very remote in a global context. So the prospective rocks that we're looking in here are Cretaceous sediments. They form an extensive basin along the western half of Gabon. They're related to the polar part of the Atlantic Ocean. As I mentioned before, they do host oil deposits. The same basin hosts oil deposits to the southwest. We're seeing Mississippi Valley type lead zinc mineralisation in rocks at the surface along the length of our entire project area. It's about 85 kilometres long. Along this basement contact, these are Proterozoic rocks. They're granodiorites, gneisses. This Cretaceous basin is a sedimentary basin. The extent of anomalism along tens of kilometres at the surface, whoops, go back one, at the surface has a potential, it sort of suggests a major fluid flow event in here. We even have some information from historic oil drilling that there has been sphalerite and galena seen in a couple of kilometres down in the basin to the southwest. So we know that there's a major fluid flow event. We know that there's a lot of base metals running through the system. It's just a matter of finding where an ore body may be located. There's been limited historic exploration in the project area. The BRGM, the French Geological Survey, were exploring for primarily lead deposits throughout they were there in the 60s, 70s, but completed their work in 1981. They were looking for shallow lead deposits down to a depth of no greater than 15 metres. So consequently, the work that they did was focused on lead. Galena, the ore mineral for lead, is very easy to see. Sphalerite, the ore mineral for zinc, is very difficult to see. The assaying that was done by the BRGM at the time was based around visual lead. So where they saw enough lead to think that there may be ore grades, they assayed. Where they did not assay. They drilled about 400 holes in the deposit, in the two prospect areas that they worked, at Dikaki and Nyambukamba. Those holes averaged 16 metres depth. So in a modern exploration context, this area is basically untouched. The majority of those holes that they did drill were at least mineralised, and many of them terminated in mineralisation. The key point there is that the assaying was done based on visual lead estimates. When this project was brought to us, we identified the fact that there was almost certainly going to be more zinc in this system than was identified by that original exploration by the BRGM. So we conducted due diligence work on the project. We originally entered into an option arrangement to enter into a joint venture with our partner Battery Minerals. I'll go through a little bit of that later. As part of that due diligence work, we duplicated a number of holes that were drilled by the BRGM. We weren't exploring for, we didn't consider these areas to be prospective specifically for new ore bodies. What we wanted to show was that, first of all, the lead and zinc numbers that were derived by the historic exploration were real. And secondly, as the assaying was selective by BRGM at the time, we considered there to be much more zinc in the system than they ever identified. We were able to show that the entire thickness of the basin sediments in the areas that they had explored is anomalous to rich in zinc. So an example of that, even though these aren't necessarily ore grade numbers, that interval there averages 37% zinc equivalent. The ratio of zinc to lead depends largely on the rock types. The coarser rocks tend to be, the coarser sandstones tend to be galena rich. The finer mudstones and carbonates tend to be zinc rich. The ratios of lead zinc range from 1 to 10 to 10 to 1, but sort of average out at about 1 to 1 across the areas that we've looked at so far. So this drilling was confirmatory in nature. We conducted it in March, April last year. And we satisfied ourselves that the nature of the rocks were able to develop a significant lead zinc system in the area. These are from Dikaki, about 5 kilometres to the north. We didn't do any confirmation drilling, but we have confidence that the numbers that came out of this area here are going to be similar, and there's going to be a lot more zinc in this area than noted originally by the BRGM. A very simple pathway of exploration here. We see anomalism at surface, we see rocks at surface. These things aren't buried under hundreds of metres of cover. So Exploration 101 works here. We conducted across our 25 kilometre priority 1 zone, a soil sampling survey, simple conventional soils. We collected about 7,000 soil samples along the contact region. We generated about 20 strike kilometres of high order zinc lead anomalies, averaging greater than 500 ppm, peaking at about 3,000 ppm zinc and 2,500 ppm lead. We consistently see rocks that assay greater than 20% combined lead zinc. Again, the ratios of those vary from 1 to 10, 10 to 1, depending on whether they're finer or coarser grained. Typically, as I said before, those coarser units are lead rich. It's also important to note that the galena is easier to see than the sphalerite. The next step in our exploration, we can light up the galena using geophysical methods. We're using a combination at the moment of IP and NSAMT, natural source audiomagnetotellurics, and we are seeing anomalies in the early stages of our work. They give us some confidence that there are the bigger fish along down dip and down plunge from the original work that was completed. So we recently announced we've actually taken the project 100% from our joint venture partners on very favourable terms. We see this as being a major step forward for the company. Alongside our Gabon project, I'll just quickly run through. We have a couple of Australian projects located in the Northern Territory. Our Lawn Hill project, zinc, copper, cobalt, lead project in the same rocks that host the Century Zinc mine, a long strike to the west of an emerging project, the Walford Creek Copper Cobalt project. these areas are subject to native title negotiations before they can be granted. Very minimal historic work done in this area, but we see zinc, lead, copper, cobalt anomalism from stream sediment sampling. We also have a lithium cobalt project where we see these Wongala sweet granites, known in the Northern Territory as lithium fertile granites. Very early stage exploration. There's been a lot of other work done in this region, but not for lithium. We also have a legacy asset that remains on our books, the Kangalooie Copper Project, which some of you may be familiar with from the Zambezi days. I won't go into the details of that, of the issues with the environmental. It's a pending court case, basically. We've written that project down to zero and looking at divestment options for that. That's Trek Metals. Thank you very much.